in the West Coast Conference. It's building on 2 decades now. BYU, I think, has been a great addition to the conference. They will leave for the Big 12 after this season. I think they have been wonderful to add to the conference, whether their fan base, the number of eyeballs they bring, and attention they bring to the conference. The way that they are resourced and the size of their arena and the attention, it's just wonderful. But they're going to move on. And so for this year and then for next year too, as BYU leaves, there's even more of a question of who are those programs that are coming up after Gonzaga, and is San Diego one of those? And I think that is why Steve Lavin was brought in, was raising the profile of the Toreros, of getting them to compete at that kind of level where St. Mary's has been, right? Where it's like, okay, we're competing, we're going to tournaments all the time, we're competing for postseason spots. You don't have to necessarily win the WCC, because as the conference has shown, multiple teams are going to the tournament, which is the ultimate goal, to help your conference and all 10 of its members, to gain that kind of reward from financially otherwise from the tournament, but the accolades that come with it. So again, this year is the first year. It's the building, it's the foundation of a new program. But yes, in the future, that is exactly the question. Can the Toreros become what St. Mary's is and what BYU has been, and these teams you mentioned, Santa Clara and USF, and it's somebody different every year, but consistently, can you get into that number, compete for the bye to the semifinals and those kinds of things in the West Coast Conference? That's what the future is. We'll see what happens here right now for this season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams who are making some pretty good improvements as we kind of start to move into this transition of BYU is kind of going to leave, and who's going to take their spot, and like who's going to be that next team to be consistently that next team. Because there's a lot of programs in this conference have done, like in my eyes, like have done the work to kind of make sure that they're in position to kind of make that next step and be in that and be the next team to kind of replace the BYU, at least in like the standings front and just the notoriety front. And so I think I got like one last question. I asked this of Anthony Passarelli last week, so I want to ask it of you. Of the you cannot pick San Diego as your answer for this one. So okay. of the other 9 WCC cities, what is your favorite to visit? And then what is your kind of go-to like food place in that city?
Oh boy. Well, so if you can't pick San Diego, obviously, it's incredibly easy and fun to come to the Jane Craig Pavilion every time. I always enjoyed driving up to Malibu. It's an easy drive. You walk out Firestone Fieldhouse there, Pepperdine. You're overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I always enjoyed that. It was very zen, and it was a nice moment. And you're easily coming back home after the game. It's up and back. It's an easy one to do. Yep. I always thought Provo was beautiful to visit, with the Wasatch Mountains in the background on a clear day, snow-capped mountains. I thought that was always beautiful. But I don't know. I don't necessarily have a best spot to stop in, but I always enjoyed the accommodations in Spokane, staying at the Davenport, and it was always an old school feel. It was very classy up in Spokane. It always took care of you. It felt like going to Spokane was always a big time thing because it was Gonzaga, obviously, and they were always a top 5 program. But it felt classy, and it felt like it was big time to be on that road trip, if that makes sense. So those are some of the answers I would give. Obviously, outside of San Diego for those kind of things.
Yeah, the Davenport is always like every time, and I've talked to anyone who's gone up to Spokane, everyone talks about the Davenport and just like how top notch that place has been. Eventually, I'll get up there just to kind of see, because I got to see a game up in the kennel at some point. Well, thanks, Jack, for taking some time. Basketball season is only weeks away. We're getting revved up. I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited to get this going, and we'll catch up probably down the road.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me. Let's see what happens. It's really exciting down here in San Diego. I appreciate it.
All right. I want to thank Jack again for hopping on and talking some San Diego hoops. We're only a few weeks away, only a little more than a month away. It's kind of crazy that we're almost here. And San Diego is going to be in the mix. San Diego is going to be in this conversation. We're going to be talking about them, I think, all year long. I feel less like that this is an LMU situation from a year ago. And yes, LMU kind of gets pounded on a little bit because of what the expectations were a year ago and then how it all went. But I think there's a lot more, not necessarily trepidation, but there's you're going to take San Diego right now with a little grain of salt, as opposed to like, I'm going to be fully buy into San Diego where they are this year. Because I agree with Jack. I think that it's not necessarily about the success of this year. It's really kind of seeing how this program grows into year 2, year 3, year 4 with Lavin, and kind of seeing how they grow. Because there is an opportunity here with BYU leaving the conference for someone to step into that role. And maybe that's USF, maybe it's San Diego, maybe it's Santa Clara. I think we'll see over the next couple of years who is willing to, who's not to say willing, everyone is willing, who's ready to step into that role and be the next team to be consistent year after year after year in the WCC. And we'll talk a little bit about some injury news. So it came out yesterday on Monday, the 27th, that BYU guard Trevin Knell is actually going to be out for the next 3 to 4 months. He has a torn rotator cuff, which 3 to 4 months, that probably puts him out until conference play. And this is a pretty big blow for BYU. This was a team that we knew even last year had a problem getting buckets easy. And this is arguably their best 3-point shooter, and he'll be out for at least the first half of the season. This was Knell started 18 games last year, played in 35. He averaged 6.3, shot 36% from 3-point land. He was 45% the year before. So we knew like this was a guy who could actually get you buckets if you needed them. And so again, this is a big blow, especially when you also add in the fact that you also don't have the likes of Tejon Lucas and Alex Barcelo. So this puts a little bit more pressure on some of the other role players, and then also on Rudy Williams, who is coming in as a transfer. And so there's going to be a lot more pressure on him to kind of be that offensive motor for this BYU team. And again, this is one of the things I think is a big question about BYU, is where the offense is going to come from, because it was the question last year. And I'm not entirely sure that the question has been answered, but only time will tell. And we'll also kind of go into a full preview of BYU in the coming weeks, so that we have kind of a rundown of what we should expect from the Cougars. All right, and that'll do it for this week's episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Now that we're only a little more than a month away from the season, we'll start to get into the weekly schedule of the podcast. So we won't be waiting every couple weeks anymore. We'll be getting down to business every single week as we start to analyze the games, schedules, and everything else, getting closer to conference play. So in the meantime, be sure to subscribe on your favorite streaming service. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you'd rather see the video version. You can search Unofficial WCC Hoops Podcast there. You could also follow me on Twitter at Posts by Zach for even more social media, not social media, but more WCC information and analysis and everything else. So until then, I'm Zach Farmer, and I will catch you later.